My name is Vrex Dowlow, Senior Intelligence Officer of the Galactic Observation Fleet, 7th Sector Division. I have spent 43 standard years watching species across this galaxy do ridiculous, baffling, and occasionally horrifying things. I have watched the Korathi eat their own battle commanders after a loss, which, honestly, improved their military performance significantly. I have watched the Senva negotiate a peace treaty using interpretive dance that lasted 6 full rotations. I have documented the Thurvian Empire's legendary invention of self-exploding warships, which again was not intentional. I thought I had seen everything. I was wrong. Because nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, in 43 years of professional alien watching, could have prepared me for what humanity did on the morning of the Galactic Council Tribunal of Solvex 4. Let me back up. The war, if you could call it that, started because of a misunderstanding. Most catastrophic things in this galaxy do. The Druvan Collective, a race of 7-foot insectoid creatures with the diplomatic patience of a hungry predator and the military budget of a small moon, had decided that humanity's sector of space was, in their own words, wasted on the soft ones. They presented this claim formally to the Galactic Council. The Council, being the Council, did what it always does. It formed a subcommittee. The subcommittee scheduled a tribunal. The tribunal was given a date 3 months out. The Druvan did not wait 3 months. They moved 3 fleets into human territory inside of 2 standard weeks. The humans, to the shock of absolutely everyone watching, did not immediately scatter. They retreated, yes. They fell back, but they fell back in a very specific, very deliberate way that none of our tactical analysts could quite explain. Our best military strategist, Commander Orith Vaughn, stared at the human fleet movement patterns for 2 days straight, and then said with tremendous authority, "I have absolutely no idea what they are doing." That was alarming. Orith Vaughn had correctly predicted the outcomes of 69 consecutive military engagements across 4 species. He is not a humble man by nature. Hearing him admit confusion was the intelligence equivalent of watching a mountain apologize. The Druvan advanced. The humans pulled back. The Druvan took 3 outer systems. The humans said nothing publicly. No declaration of war. No formal protests. No emergency sessions requested. Just silence. The galaxy watched. I watched. And then the humans sent 1 ship. 1 single ship. To the Druvan flagship. Not a warship. Not a carrier. Our sensors confirmed it was a diplomatic courier vessel, lightly armed, crewed by, according to our embedded contact, approximately 11 humans. The Druvan flagship, for reference, was the size of a medium city and crewed by 40,000 soldiers. I assumed the humans were surrendering. I was embarrassingly wrong. The human representative who stepped off that courier ship was named Tobias Wren. I have since read everything available about Tobias Wren. He was 41 years old. He had, prior to this moment, worked as a mid-level trade negotiator for a minor human commercial coalition. He had negotiated freight contracts, cargo tariffs, shipping lane usage fees. This was the man humanity sent to face the Druvan Collective's Supreme Fleet Commander, a creature named Grek Solvax, who had in his career personally overseen the destruction of 4 inhabited worlds and was famous across 12 systems for having never, not once, lost a negotiation. Grek Solvax received Tobias Wren in the flagship's primary command chamber. Our surveillance feed, acquired through methods I am not authorized to describe, caught the whole thing. Grek Solvax looked at Tobias Wren the way a very large predator looks at something very small that has wandered into its territory by accident. "You represent humanity?" Grek Solvax said. His translator rendered it in flat, mechanical tones, but the contempt was legible even through the technology. "I do," said Tobias Wren. He was holding a small metal case. He set it on the table between them with a soft click. "And I brought you something." Grek Solvax's compound eyes tracked the case. His mandibles shifted. "A weapon?" "No," said Tobias Wren. He opened the case. Inside was a sandwich. I am not using a mistranslation. Our analyst triple-checked the footage and the cultural database. It was a sandwich. 2 pieces of bread. Some kind of layered filling, wrapped in a thin piece of what our food science division later confirmed was a material called parchment paper. Grek Solvax stared at it. His 40,000 soldiers presumably were also staring at sensor feeds in varying degrees of confusion. I was staring at my surveillance monitor with my secondary eye twitching in a way it only does during high-stress cognitive dissonance. "What?" said Grek Solvax, with the slow, dangerous precision of someone who suspects they are being insulted but cannot yet confirm it. "Is that?" "Lunch," said Tobias Wren. He sat down. He pulled the sandwich out of the case. He unwrapped it. He took a bite. He chewed. He looked at Greg Solvax with the calm expression of a man eating lunch. I figured, he said between bites, we should talk, and I always think better when I eat. You hungry? Now. Here is where I need to explain something about the Druvan Collective, because context matters enormously here. The Druvan do not eat during negotiations. They consider eating a sign of physical vulnerability. To eat in front of an enemy is in Druvan culture something between an insult and a confession of weakness. It signals that you are distracted, that your body is prioritizing base functions over combat readiness. It is, for them, the behavioral equivalent of handing someone your weapon and asking them to hold it for a moment. Tobias Wren either knew this and did not care, or did not know this and also did not care. Either way, he kept eating. Greg Solvax's composure, our analyst noted, cracked slightly at the fourth bite. His mandibles were moving in the pattern our xenobiologist Petra Dax identified as involuntary agitation response. He was not used to being ignored. He was not used to an opponent whose primary concern, in that moment, appeared to be finishing a sandwich. You came here, Greg Solvax said, each word bitten off precisely. To eat. I came here to talk, said Tobias Wren. He wiped his hands on a small piece of cloth he produced from his jacket pocket. He folded the cloth. He put it away. The sandwich was just practical. It's a 6-hour flight from our nearest station, and I skipped breakfast. He paused. Bad habit. My mother always said the same thing. Do the Druvan have mothers? There was a silence so profound our audio sensors briefly flagged it as equipment failure. We have, said Greg Solvax, very carefully. Genetic origin providers. Same thing, more or less, said Tobias Wren cheerfully. Did yours ever tell you not to skip meals? I want to be very clear. In 43 years of intelligence work, after watching hundreds of first contact scenarios, war declarations, peace negotiations, and diplomatic incidents spanning a dozen civilizations, I have never, not once, watched a human, or any species, open a negotiation with the question of whether a warlord's mother had advice about breakfast habits. Greg Solvax looked at Tobias Wren for a very long time. Then, slowly, with the air of a predator who has become so confused it has temporarily forgotten it is supposed to be predatory, he sat down. Back in our observation hub, Commander Orith Vaughn had arrived beside me. He was watching the feed over my shoulder. He said nothing for approximately 4 minutes. Then he said, "Is he actually doing this?" "It appears so," I said. "Is it working?" I checked the biometric readouts we were pulling from the Druvan flagship's own atmospheric sensors, which, yes, we had hacked, and I am still not authorized to confirm that. Greg Solvax's aggression markers are down 11%. Orith Vaughn was quiet again. "How?" he finally said. "I genuinely do not know," I told him. What happened next in that room over the following 2 hours was, diplomatically speaking, unlike anything in our recorded history. Tobias Wren talked. He talked about the 3 outer systems the Druvan had taken. He talked about the people who lived there, not in abstract population figures, but in specific individual terms. He mentioned a woman named Calla Renz who ran a supply depot on the second moon of Harath Station, and had been doing so for 30 years. He mentioned a teacher named Domingo Ferris on the agricultural colony of Vos Prime, who had, according to Tobias Wren, the best method of explaining orbital mechanics to 12-year-olds that anyone had ever devised. He mentioned a retired engineer named Paz Okoro, who had built most of the water reclamation infrastructure on outer Solvex by hand over 20 years. He did not argue law. He did not cite treaty violations. He did not threaten consequences. He just told Greg Solvax about people, specific people, with names, with histories, with breakfast habits apparently, because he mentioned that Calla Renz also skipped breakfast, which he considered a personal failing, and that Paz Okoro drank something called black coffee at 5 in the morning every day, which he considered admirable. Greg Solvax, destroyer of worlds, commander of 40,000 soldiers, undefeated in 61 years of military conquest, sat across a table from Tobias Wren and, our sensors confirmed, his aggression markers continued to drop. By the time Tobias Wren finished, they were down 38%. I filed my preliminary report that evening. My supervisor, High Analyst Kovatrell, read it and sent back 2 words. "Explain further." I wrote back, "I cannot." She called me directly, which she has done exactly twice in 12 years of working together. "Vrex," she said, "are you telling me that humanity's response to a 3-fleet invasion was to send one man with a sandwich?" "Correct. And it is working?" "Partially. The negotiations are ongoing. But Greg Solvax has not ended the meeting. He has, in fact, extended it twice. He also asked Tobias Wren a question about the teacher. Domingo Ferris. Silence from Covetrell. He asked, she said slowly, about the teacher. He wanted to know the orbital mechanics explanation method. Our translator team believes he was genuinely curious. Another silence. Vrex, said Covetrell, I have been analyzing civilizations for 31 years. I know. I don't understand humans. Neither do I said, and I am beginning to think that might be intentional on their part. By the end of that first day, the Druvan fleet had not advanced further. By the end of the second day, Grek Solvax had agreed to a temporary cessation of fleet movement pending the formal tribunal. By the end of the third day, Tobias Wren had, according to our contact, shared what appeared to be a second food item, something called a biscuit, with a junior Druvan officer who had expressed curiosity about it, which was, in Druvan culture, the social equivalent of shaking hands. The galaxy, for the first time in weeks, took a breath. But here is the thing. Here is the part that kept me awake, the part that made my secondary eye twitch even when I was off duty. Tobias Wren had bought time. He had, through methods that no tactical algorithm we possessed could have predicted or recommended, stopped in advance that 3 full Galactic Council defense fleets had failed to slow. But the tribunal was still coming, and the Druvan collective, aggression markers aside, still had 3 fleets in human space. Whatever Tobias Wren had started, it was not finished. And back in my observation chair watching the feed from Solvex 4 where the tribunal would be held in 3 weeks' time, I had the deeply uncomfortable feeling that the sandwich had only been the beginning. Humanity, in my experience, always saves the strangest part for last. 3 weeks, that is how long the galaxy had to prepare for the tribunal of Solvex 4. 3 weeks of nervous energy humming through every diplomatic channel, every intelligence network, every backroom conversation happening on every station, colony, and capital world from here to the outer belt. 3 weeks of species who had never once agreed on anything suddenly agreeing on one thing. This was going to be spectacular, and not in the good way. The Druvan collective arrived at Solvex 4 with 9 ships. 9. The tribunal rules allowed each party a maximum of 3 escort vessels. The Druvan brought 9 and filed the excess 6 under a category called observational presence, which is, in Galactic Council legal terms, the equivalent of showing up to a dinner party with 6 armed bodyguards and calling them waitstaff. The Council noted the violation. The Council issued a formal written concern. The Druvan responded by parking the 6th ship slightly closer to the station than the 5th. Humanity arrived with 1 shuttle, the same shuttle, in fact, that Tobias Wren had taken to the Druvan flagship 3 weeks prior. Our docking registry confirmed it. Same vessel identification code, same crew manifest. And there, walking off the docking ramp with a travel bag over one shoulder, and what our visual analysts confirmed was a paper cup of something hot, was Tobias Wren. He was alone. No legal team, no military advisors, no delegation of senior officials in formal attire with serious expressions and impressive titles. Just Tobias Wren, his travel bag and his hot beverage. I watched him walk through the station corridor on the surveillance feed. He stopped once to read a posted notice about maintenance work on the 3rd-level ventilation system. He nodded at it thoughtfully, as if it contained useful information. He kept walking. Orith Vaughn was beside me again. He had, in the past 3 weeks, developed a habit of appearing in my observation room whenever anything humanity-related was on the feeds. He never announced himself. He just materialized, which I found slightly unsettling, though I had stopped mentioning it. 1 man, he said, looking at the feed. 1 man, I confirmed, against the Druvan collective, at a tribunal where the legal outcome will determine whether humanity keeps or loses permanent claim to 9 inhabited systems. You are correct on all counts. Orith Vaughn folded his upper arms. What is in the cup? I checked with our chemical sensor team, who had managed to get a reading from the station's atmospheric processors. Something called coffee. It is a hot liquid with a mild stimulant compound. Humans drink it regularly, often in the morning, though Tobias Wren appears to drink it at all hours. The same thing the engineer drank. Paz Okoro. I blinked. I had not expected Orith Vaughn to remember that detail from my 3-week-old report. Correct. He was quiet for a moment. He is doing it again, Orith Vaughn said. Doing what? Being ordinary on purpose. I looked at him. In 12 years, Orith Vaughn had said perhaps 40 things in my presence that I would classify as genuinely insightful. This felt like number 41. Explain. He is reminding everyone who sees him that he is not a weapon. Orith Vaughn said simply. He is a person, with a cup, with a travel bag, with the kind of schedule that involves reading ventilation notices. He paused. It is, tactically speaking, extremely clever and infuriating. I turned back to the feed. Tobias Wren had found a bench in the corridor outside the tribunal chamber and sat down. He unzipped his travel bag. He took out a small device and began reading from it. Our tech team identified it as a basic personal reading tablet, not a legal document, not a tactical briefing. According to the content type scanner, it appeared to be a novel. He was reading a novel, outside the most important legal tribunal humanity had faced in 60 years, 40 minutes before it began. I filed this detail in my report under the heading Behavior Profile, Anomalous Calm. Then I deleted that heading and replaced it with Behavior Profile, Genuinely Do Not Know. The tribunal chamber of Solvex 4 holds 200 observers. Every seat was full. Species from across the council had sent representatives, not because they were required to, but because nobody wanted to miss this. The Druvan legal delegation was 7 strong, led by a creature named Hox Vratten, who was, by reputation, the most aggressive legal mind in Druvan history, and had, in a previous tribunal, caused a species to voluntarily surrender territory simply by the volume and duration of his opening statement. Tobias Wren sat across from all 7 of them. He had put his reading tablet away. He had finished his coffee. He placed the empty cup neatly to the side of his seat and then, apparently deciding the cup was an unnecessary presence, put it in his bag. He folded his hands on the table. He waited. Hox Vratten's opening statement lasted 47 minutes. I timed it. It covered the legal foundations of the Druvan territorial claim, the historical precedent of expansion rights under the old Council Compact, the population density thresholds that classified human-held systems as, in Hox Vratten's phrasing, strategically underutilized. It included 14 formal legal citations, 3 historical precedents, and what our language team identified as a rhetorical device called the sustained diminishment, which essentially involves describing your opponent in increasingly small terms until the chamber begins to unconsciously agree that they are not worth the argument. It was, technically speaking, an impressive performance. By the end of it, Tobias Wren had not moved. He had not taken notes. He had not shown any sign of agitation, distress, or the barely suppressed panic that our biometric sensors had recorded in the faces of 12 other species legal representatives during previous Hox Vratten performances. He looked like a man waiting for a shuttle that was running slightly late. The tribunal moderator, a senior council official named Brexa Sot, who had run 64 such proceedings and had the permanently exhausted expression of someone who had seen too much, turned to Tobias Wren. The human representative may respond. Tobias Wren nodded. He stood up. He looked at Hox Vratten. Then he turned and looked at the 200 observers in the chamber. Then he turned back. I would like to tell you about a man named Roel Adama, he said. Hox Vratten's mandibles shifted. This was not a legal counter. This was not a citation. Hox Vratten was visibly processing the situation the way a very sophisticated weapon processes the appearance of something it was not designed to target. Roel Adama, said Tobias Wren, is 73 years old. He lives on the second largest of the 9 systems currently under discussion. He has lived there for 51 years. He came when the colony was a processing station with 600 residents, and he stayed while it became a city of 4 million. Tobias Wren paused. He taught mathematics. For 40 years. Not because anyone required him to. Because the colony needed teachers and he was good at it. The chamber was quiet. Not the quiet of boredom. The quiet of 200 beings who had been expecting legal combat and had received something else entirely and did not yet know what to do with it. The Druvan legal team cited population density. Tobias Wren continued. They used the word underutilized. I would like to suggest that a world where a 73-year-old mathematics teacher has spent 51 years building something is not underutilized. It is in fact one of the most intensely utilized things in this galaxy. He let that sit for exactly 3 seconds. Rukli Adama has 17,000 former students. Some of them are engineers. Some of them are pilots. Some of them are teachers themselves now. The compound effect of one person, in one place, over 51 years, is not something you can measure with a population density chart. Hox Vratten said, sharply. This is not a legal argument. No, said Tobias Wren pleasantly. It is not. Your argument was legal. I heard every word of it. 14 citations, very thorough. He nodded with apparent sincerity. My argument is different. I am arguing that the thing you are proposing to take is not territory. It is not strategic space. It is not an underutilized resource corridor. He looked directly at Hox Vratten. It is the life's work of several million people who have been building something for generations, and I would like the chamber to understand exactly what they would be endorsing if they ruled in your favor. He sat down. In my observation room, nobody spoke for a full 30 seconds. Then one of my junior analysts, a young officer named Sev Kwar who had joined the division 8 months prior and still found most things surprising, said quietly, "Is he allowed to do that?" "Do what?" I asked. "Just tell stories. In a legal tribunal, there is no rule against it," I said. "The response period has no format requirement. He can say whatever he chooses. But it is not going to work," Sev Kwar said. "Legally, the Druven case is strong. 3 of those 4 citations Hawksvraten used are from treaties humanity actually signed. The legal precedent is not favorable." "No," I agreed. "It is not." Sev Kwar was quiet for a moment. Then, cautiously, the way someone phrases something they are not certain they are allowed to think. "Then what is he doing?" I thought about this. I thought about Tobias Wren on the Druven flagship with a sandwich. I thought about him reading a novel on a bench. I thought about him putting his empty coffee cup tidily in his bag because it was unnecessary. "He is not trying to win the legal argument," I said slowly. "Then what is he trying to win?" I looked at the feed. The chamber was still quiet in that particular way. 200 observers who had come expecting combat and received something they were still processing. A Druven legal team staring at a human who had responded to their 14 citations with a story about a mathematics teacher, Brexasot, who had run 64 tribunals, sitting at the moderator's bench with the expression of someone experiencing something new for the first time in a very long career. "The room," I said. "He is trying to win the room." The tribunal ran for 4 more hours. Hawksvraten responded with additional legal arguments. Solid ones. Well constructed. Tobias Wren listened to all of them with visible attention and then responded with more people, more names, more specific, individual, unremarkable human lives that had accumulated into something enormous over time. A woman named Sarah Mallet who had designed the water distribution network for an entire hemisphere. A pair of brothers named Fen and Kosti Braga who had spent 20 years mapping the geological formations of a moon everyone else had written off as useless and found enough mineral deposits to supply 3 sectors. A teenager named Aya Murch who had, according to Tobias Wren, recently won a regional mathematics competition and whose teacher had been, originally, one of Roel Adama's former students. He connected them. Every name connected to another name. Every story threaded into the next. He was not building a legal case. He was building a web, a visible, specific, human-shaped web of connection and consequence and accumulated years that sat in the middle of the chamber and grew larger every time Tobias Wren opened his mouth. Hawksvraten, in the 5th hour, made a tactical error, possibly out of frustration, possibly because his legal strategy had no mechanism for what was happening, he said, with audible contempt. "These individuals are not relevant to the legal question before this tribunal." Tobias Wren looked at him. For the first time in 5 hours, something shifted in his expression. Not anger, not heat, something quieter and considerably more serious. "You are correct," said Tobias Wren, "that they are not relevant to your legal question." He paused. "But they are the only question I came here to answer, because the legal question is about space, about coordinates, about treaty language, and density thresholds, and resource classification." He folded his hands on the table. "And my question is about people. Specifically, what kind of galaxy decides that the 51 years of a mathematics teacher do not constitute sufficient reason to leave him alone?" The chamber was, again, very quiet. Brexasot, who had not visibly reacted to anything in 5 hours of proceedings, wrote something on the document in front of her. The ruling came 2 days later. The Druven territorial claim was denied, not on the legal merits which, as Sev Kwar had correctly noted, were genuinely not favorable to humanity. The ruling cited, and I am reading directly from the official document here, insufficient evidence that the proposed transfer serves the broader interests of Galactic Council member welfare, which is the Council's formal way of saying the room disagreed with you, and we are going to find language to reflect that. Greg Solvax, back on his flagship, received the ruling. Our surveillance feed caught him. He stood at his command viewport for a long time looking at nothing in particular. Then he said, to no one in the room, "The teacher, Roel Adama, is he still teaching?" His communications officer confirmed after checking that Roel Adama had retired 4 years prior but still ran informal mathematics sessions from his home twice a week for neighborhood children. Greg Solvax looked out the viewport for another long moment. Then he ordered the fleet to withdraw. I submitted my final report on the Solvex 4 incident 6 days after the ruling. It was the longest report I have written in 43 years of service. My conclusion section was, by my own standards, embarrassingly short. It said the following: humanity's primary strategic asset does not appear to be military. technological or legal in nature. It is, as best as this office can determine, their capacity to make the abstract specific. Where other species argue in categories, humanity argues in names. Where other species present data, humanity presents people. The effect of this on sufficiently large audiences is difficult to quantify and nearly impossible to counter because it does not engage with the opposing argument. It changes the question entirely. I paused for a long time before writing the final line. Recommend continued and immediate observation of all human diplomatic activity. Not because they are a threat, but because in 43 years, they are the first species I have encountered that makes me genuinely uncertain what they will do next. And in this profession, that is the most significant thing I can say about anyone. Covatrell read the report. She sent back one word this time. Agreed. I closed the file. I looked at my observation feed. Somewhere on a station 6 sectors away, Tobias Wren was presumably on a shuttle home, possibly reading his novel, possibly drinking coffee, possibly doing absolutely nothing remarkable in a way that was somehow the most remarkable thing in the room. I made a note to track the shuttle, just in case. With humans, you never quite know when the next sandwich is coming.